You feel that, don't you? That discomfort, that urge to check your phone, to cough, to shift in your seat. That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Because in those 30 seconds of silence, something happened inside you. Your mind started racing. Your thoughts got louder. And that's the paradox we live in. We fill every moment with noise because we're terrified of what we might hear in the quiet. I want to tell you about a morning that changed everything for me. It was 3 years ago, and I was at the peak of what everyone else would call success. My calendar was packed, my phone never stopped buzzing. I was flying between cities, attending events, giving interviews, posting on social media every few hours. I was living the dream, right? But one morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. in a hotel room in a city I couldn't even remember arriving in. And I asked myself a question I'd been avoiding for years. Who am I when no one is watching? Who am I when the cameras stop rolling, when the applause fades, when the notifications stop coming? And I realized I had no idea I'd become so good at performing, at being what everyone needed me to be, that I'd lost touch with the person underneath all that noise. I'd forgotten how to be still. I'd forgotten how to listen to myself. So I did something radical. I know this sounds dramatic, but I canceled everything for 3 weeks. My team thought I was having a breakdown. My publicist panicked. My social media went silent. And for the first 21 days, I committed to something that terrified me more than any audition or red carpet ever had. I committed to silence. Not complete silence. I still had to function in the world, but intentional silence. No unnecessary conversations. No social media. No background music. No podcast filling every quiet moment. Just me and my thoughts. The first day was torture. Absolute torture. By hour 3, I wanted to quit. My mind was like a cafeteria of screaming teenagers. Every insecurity I'd ever had came flooding back. Every mistake I'd made played on repeat. Every conversation I'd mishandled, every opportunity I'd missed, every person I'd disappointed, it all came crashing down on me in waves. And I understood why we avoid silence. Because silence doesn't let you hide from yourself. But here's what nobody tells you about silence. It's not the enemy. The noise is. Because when you finally push through that initial chaos, when you sit with the discomfort long enough, something miraculous happens. The screaming in your mind starts to quiet down. And underneath all that noise, there's a voice, your voice, the real one, the one that knows exactly what you need, what you want, what you're meant to do. The one that's been trying to reach you for years, but couldn't get through all the static. By day 7 of my silence challenge, I started noticing things I'd been blind to my entire life. I noticed how I interrupted people constantly because I was so eager to be heard. I noticed how I filled every pause in conversation with nervous chatter. I noticed how I used words as a shield, talking endlessly about nothing to avoid dealing with something. I noticed how exhausting it was to maintain all the masks I wore for different people. There's a story about a young monk who went to a Zen master seeking enlightenment. The master invited him for tea. As the master poured, the tea filled the cup, then overflowed onto the saucer, then onto the table. The student shouted, "Stop! The cup is full." And the master smiled and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" That's what silence does. It empties your cup. It creates space for truth to enter. And let me tell you, truth doesn't shout. Truth whispers. You have to get very, very quiet to hear it. I remember day 10 of my challenge. I was sitting in my garden, a garden I'd paid someone to design 2 years earlier, but had never actually sat in. And I watched a bird building a nest. For 45 minutes, I just watched this bird fly back and forth, carrying twigs, testing them, rearranging them. And it hit me like lightning. This bird wasn't checking Instagram between flights to see if other birds liked its nest. This bird wasn't comparing its nest to some idealized version on Pinterest. This bird was just building, completely present in each moment, guided by instinct and intuition. When did we lose that? When did we start needing constant validation for our every move? We live in a world that has declared war on silence. Think about it. When was the last time you sat in complete silence for more than 5 minutes? When was the last time you drove without the radio on? When was the last time you ate a meal without scrolling through your phone? We've become addicted to input. We consume information like it's oxygen, but we're suffocating on noise. And here's the cruel irony: we talk more than any generation in history, yet we communicate less. We have more ways to connect than ever before, yet we feel more isolated. We share our lives constantly, yet nobody really knows us. Because we're not sharing truth, we're sharing performance. We're sharing carefully curated versions of ourselves that we think people want to see. I'll never forget something that happened during my second week of silence. I was in a coffee shop. Yes, I still had to exist in the world, and I was just sitting there watching people. Not in a creepy way, but just observing. And I noticed that out of about 30 people in that coffee shop, not a single person was just sitting. Everyone was doing something. Typing on laptops, scrolling through phones, reading, listening to something through earbuds. Not one person was just being. There was a couple at the table next to me. They spent 45 minutes together, and I'm not exaggerating when I say they looked at each other maybe twice. Both of them on their phones the entire time, occasionally showing each other something on their screens, laughing at other people's content, other people's jokes, other people's lives. They were together, but completely alone, and I thought, this is the modern tragedy. We're starving for connection while sitting across from each other. During week 2, something shifted in me. The silence stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like refuge. I began to understand what all the mystics and sages had been trying to tell us for thousands of years. In silence, you meet God. I don't care what you call it. God, the universe, your higher self, consciousness, energy, whatever language works for you. But there's something sacred that emerges when you get still enough to listen. I started noticing patterns in my thoughts. I realized I had the same 7 or 8 worries on a constant loop, the same insecurities, the same fears, and none of them were real. They were just stories I'd been telling myself for so long that I'd started believing they were truth. Silence helped me see the difference between my thoughts and reality, and that distinction is everything. Here's what I learned: you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are like weather patterns passing through the sky of your consciousness. Some are sunny, some are stormy, but none of them are permanent, and none of them are you. But when you're constantly distracted, you identify with every thought that passes through. You believe every fear, every doubt, every cruel thing your inner critic says. Silence creates space between you and your thoughts. It lets you observe them without being controlled by them. By day 15, I had an experience I can only describe as coming home to myself. I was walking on the beach early in the morning, and the sun was rising, and there was no one around, and I wasn't thinking about anything in particular. I was just walking, just being, and suddenly I felt this overwhelming sense of okayness. Not happiness exactly, but something deeper. A fundamental sense that I was exactly where I needed to be, that I was enough exactly as I was, that everything was unfolding exactly as it should. No achievement, no approval, no external validation could give me what I felt in that moment, and it was free. It had been available to me my entire life. I just had never been quiet enough to access it. You know what's fascinating? We spend billions of dollars every year on self-help books, therapy, courses, retreats, all trying to find ourselves, trying to figure out our purpose, trying to discover what we're meant to do with our lives. And I'm not saying those things don't have value. They absolutely do. But what if the answer isn't out there? What if it's been inside you all along, and the only thing standing between you and your truth is noise? There's a reason why every spiritual tradition includes some form of silence. Jesus spent 40 days in the desert. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree. Muhammad retreated to the cave. Moses climbed the mountain. They all knew something we've forgotten. Wisdom doesn't come from accumulating more information. Wisdom comes from going inward. I want to share something vulnerable with you. During my silence challenge around day 17, I had a complete breakdown. I mean, a full, ugly, crying on the floor breakdown. Because when you get quiet enough, when you remove all the distractions, you have to face everything you've been running from. And I'd been running from a lot. I'd been running from grief I'd never processed. I'd been running from relationships I'd sabotaged. I'd been running from parts of myself I judged as not good enough. I'd been running from the gap between who I was and who I pretended to be. And in that breakdown, in that moment of complete surrender, I realized something profound. You can't heal what you don't feel. You can't transform what you don't acknowledge. And silence forces you to feel everything. It strips away the armor. It removes the escape routes. It holds up a mirror and says, here you are, all of you. The good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful. This is what you've been avoiding. But here's the gift on the other side of that breakdown was a breakthrough. When I stopped running, when I finally turned around and faced everything I'd been avoiding, it lost its power over me. The things I'd been terrified of weren't nearly as scary as I'd imagined. Most of them were just old pain that needed to be acknowledged and released. And silence gave me the space to do that. By day 21, I was a different person. Not in a dramatic, unrecognizable way, but in a fundamental shift of being. I was calmer. I was more present. I was more honest with myself and others. I stopped needing to fill every moment with activity or conversation. I stopped seeking validation from external sources. I started trusting my intuition in a way I never had before. I started making decisions from a place of inner knowing rather than fear or societal expectation. And here's what I want you to understand. I'm not special. I'm not more disciplined or more spiritual or more capable than you. I'm just someone who got desperate enough to try something different. And if I can do it, so can you. So let me talk about this 21-day challenge. Why 21 days? Because research shows it takes approximately 21 days to form a new habit, to rewire neural pathways, to create lasting change. 21 days is long enough to push through the initial resistance, but short enough to not feel overwhelming. Here's what I'm challenging you to do. But I want to be clear, this isn't about becoming a monk or moving to a monastery. This is about creating intentional pockets of silence in your daily life. This is about learning to be comfortable in your own presence. This is about reconnecting with the wisest part of yourself. For the next 21 days, I want you to commit to 1 hour of intentional silence every day. I know what you're thinking. I don't have an extra hour. But here's the truth, you do. We all have the same 24 hours. The difference is how we choose to spend them. And I promise you, nothing you're currently doing is more important than this. Not that extra hour of Netflix, not scrolling through social media, not any of the 100 ways we waste time without even realizing it. This hour of silence doesn't mean you sit in meditation for 60 minutes. Although if you want to, amazing. It means you create space in your day where you're not consuming information, not engaging with screens, not filling the void with noise. It could be a morning walk without your phone. It could be sitting in your backyard watching the clouds. It could be journaling. It could be staring out the window on your commute without earbuds in. The key is no input, just you and your thoughts. And I'm going to be honest with you about what's going to happen. Days 1 through 3 are going to be uncomfortable. Your mind is going to resist. You're going to have 1,000 urgent things that suddenly need to be done. You're going to question whether this is really necessary. Your brain is addicted to stimulation, and like any addiction, there's going to be withdrawal. Push through it. Days 4 through 7, things start to settle. You're still restless, but you're getting used to the discomfort. You're starting to notice things, the quality of light at different times of day, the rhythm of your breath, the tension you hold in your shoulders, small things but important things. Days 8 through 14, this is where the real work happens. The surface level thoughts start to quiet down and deeper stuff starts to emerge. This is where you might cry. This is where you might get angry. This is where old wounds might resurface. Don't run from it. This is exactly what needs to happen. This is the healing. Days 15 through 21, you start to experience something you might have never felt before: peace. Not the fake peace that comes from distraction or denial, but real peace, the kind that comes from self-acceptance, the kind that comes from alignment, the kind that makes you realize you don't need to be anyone other than who you are. Let me tell you what happened to Sarah. Sarah took this challenge after attending one of my talks. She was a corporate executive, mother of 3, running on fumes, living on coffee and adrenaline. She told me later that the first week, she almost quit multiple times. Her hour of silence felt like torture. Her mind wouldn't stop listing everything she should be doing instead, but she stuck with it. By week 2, she noticed something interesting. She'd been having the same argument with her husband for 5 years about his lack of ambition. During her silence practice, she realized the real issue wasn't his ambition. It was her own fear that she'd made the wrong choice, that she'd sacrificed too much of herself for her career, that she was living someone else's dream. The argument with her husband was easier than facing her own regrets. That realization changed everything. Not overnight. Real change never happens overnight, but gradually. She started making different choices. She delegated more at work. She started saying no to things that didn't align with her values. She had an honest conversation with her husband about her fears. Their relationship transformed, not because he changed, but because she did. Because she got honest with herself first. Or take Marcus. Marcus was a college student who'd been dealing with anxiety and depression for years. He'd tried medication, therapy, everything. When he started the silence challenge, he discovered something shocking. He'd been so busy running from his pain that he'd never actually dealt with it. He'd been using constant stimulation, social media, video games, partying, to numb himself. The silence forced him to feel everything he'd been avoiding. It wasn't pleasant. But after 21 days, he told me something I'll never forget. He said, I realized that my anxiety wasn't the problem. My anxiety was trying to tell me something. It was saying, you're living a lie. You're pretending to be someone you're not. You're doing things that don't matter to make people happy who don't really care about you. Once I started listening to it, instead of running from it, everything changed. Here's what silence teaches you that words never could: the difference between responding and reacting. When you're constantly stimulated, you're always in reactive mode. Something happens and you immediately react, usually from fear, ego, or conditioning. But when you practice silence, when you create space between stimulus and response, you develop the ability to choose your response consciously. I learned this during an argument with a family member about 2 months after my initial challenge. In the past, I would have immediately gotten defensive, said things I'd regret, escalated the situation. But something was different this time. There was this space, this pause, where I could feel my emotions without being controlled by them. I could see the situation clearly instead of through the filter of my ego. And instead of reacting, I responded. I listened. I acknowledged their feelings. I spoke my truth without attacking theirs. The conversation ended with understanding instead of estrangement. That's the power of silence. It doesn't make problems disappear, but it changes your relationship to them. It gives you access to a deeper intelligence than your thinking mind, an intelligence that knows exactly what to do if you'll just get quiet enough to hear it. Silence also teaches you about enoughness. We live in a culture of more. More money, more success, more likes, more followers, more achievements. The goalposts keep moving. There's always another level to reach, another milestone to hit. It's exhausting, and it's a game you can never win because there's no finish line. But in silence, you discover something revolutionary. You're already enough. Right now. Exactly as you are. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to achieve anything to deserve love or happiness or peace. Those things aren't achievements. They're your birthright. But we've been conditioned to believe otherwise. And that conditioning keeps us trapped on a hamster wheel of endless striving. I remember the exact moment this hit me during my challenge. I was sitting outside, doing nothing, which felt wildly uncomfortable because I'd spent my whole life doing something, and I caught myself thinking, I should be productive right now. I should be working on something. I'm wasting time. And then I asked myself, wasting time compared to what? Who decided that being is less valuable than doing? Who made the rule that your worth is measured by your output? Nobody. It's a story. A story we've all bought into without question. But silence reveals it as fiction. Because when you strip away all the doing, all the achieving, all the performing, you're still here. You still exist. You still have value, not because of what you've done or what you've accomplished, but simply because you're alive. This is hard for people to accept. Especially in our culture, we've been taught that our value comes from our productivity, our success, our contribution. We've internalized capitalism so deeply that we've started treating ourselves as products that need to be constantly improved, optimized, upgraded. But you're not a product, you're a human being. And human beings don't need to earn their right to exist. Silence teaches you to distinguish between your authentic desires and the desires that have been programmed into you. How many of your goals are actually yours? How many are things you think you should want because society says they're important? How many are driven by fear? Fear of not measuring up, fear of being left behind, fear of disappointing people. During my silence practice, I made a list of everything I thought I wanted. Then I sat with each item and asked myself, where does this desire come from? Some desires lit me up from the inside. They felt aligned, true, exciting in a deep way. Others felt heavy, obligatory, like something I should want but didn't really. Those were the programmed desires. The ones I'd absorbed from family, culture, media. The ones that were never actually mine. I started letting go of the shoulds. And you know what? My life got smaller in the best possible way. Simpler, more focused, more intentional. I stopped chasing things that didn't actually matter to me. I stopped saying yes to opportunities that looked good on paper but felt wrong in my gut. I started building a life based on my own values instead of borrowed values. That's another gift of silence clarity, when your mind is constantly full of noise, other people's opinions, advertisements, news, social media, entertainment. You can't hear your own voice clearly. It gets drowned out. But silence is like wiping a foggy mirror. Suddenly you can see yourself clearly. You can see what actually matters to you. You can see where you've been betraying yourself to please others. You can see where you've been living on autopilot instead of making conscious choices. And with clarity comes courage. Because once you see the truth clearly, once you know what you really want and who you really are, it becomes harder to accept anything less. You start making braver choices. You start honoring yourself even when it's uncomfortable. You start speaking up instead of staying small. You start leaving situations that don't serve you, not from a place of anger or judgment, but from a place of self-respect. I watched this happen with Jennifer, another person who took the challenge. Jennifer had been in a relationship for 8 years that she knew wasn't right, but she'd convinced herself that relationships required sacrifice, that no relationship was perfect, that she should be grateful for what she had. During her silence practice, the truth she'd been avoiding became impossible to ignore. She wasn't happy. She hadn't been happy for years. She was staying out of fear. Fear of being alone. Fear of starting over. Fear of disappointing her partner and family. The silence gave her the courage to admit the truth, first to herself, then to her partner. It wasn't easy. Endings never are. But 6 months later, she told me she felt alive again. She felt like herself again. She said the silence taught her that betraying yourself to avoid discomfort is the worst kind of betrayal. That honoring your truth is the highest form of self-love. Let's talk about something else. Silence reveals the stories you tell yourself about yourself. We all have these stories, narratives about who we are, what we're capable of, what we deserve. I'm not creative. I'm bad with money. I'm too old to start over. I'm not the kind of person who... These stories run in the background of our minds like software, shaping our choices and limiting our possibilities. The crazy thing is, most of these stories aren't even true. They're just things we decided about ourselves at some point, usually based on limited information or painful experiences, and then we kept reinforcing them until they became beliefs. But beliefs are just thoughts we keep thinking. They're not facts. They're not destiny. They're changeable. Silence helps you identify these stories. When you get quiet and observe your thoughts, you start noticing patterns. You start seeing the same limiting beliefs come up over and over. And once you see them clearly, once you recognize them as stories rather than truth, they lose their power. You can start writing new stories. Better stories. Stories that serve you instead of limit you. I had a story that I was too much. too loud, too emotional, too intense. I'd been told this directly and indirectly my whole life. So I developed a habit of making myself smaller, dimming my light, holding back my enthusiasm. During my silence challenge, I realized this story was destroying me. It was keeping me from showing up fully in my own life. And I made a decision. I was done with that story. If I was too much for some people, they weren't my people. The right people would love my too muchness. They'd celebrate it, not ask me to hide it. Letting go of that story changed everything. I started showing up differently, more authentically. And you know what happened? Some people did leave. Some people were uncomfortable with the real me. But the people who stayed, the people who showed up for the authentic version of me, those connections went deeper than anything I'd experienced before. Because they were based on truth instead of performance. What story are you telling yourself about yourself? What limiting belief has been running your life without your conscious awareness? Silence will show you. And once you see it, you can choose differently. Here's something else. Silence taught me the art of listening. Real listening. Not the kind where you're waiting for your turn to talk. Not the kind where you're formulating your response while the other person is still speaking, but deep, present, receptive listening. The kind where you're actually trying to understand another person's experience instead of just confirming your own perspective. We're terrible listeners in this culture. We interrupt constantly. We make conversations about ourselves. We half listen while checking our phones. We hear words but miss the meaning underneath. We listen to respond instead of listening to understand. And the result is that everyone feels unheard. Everyone feels misunderstood. Everyone feels alone. But when you practice silence, when you get comfortable with pauses and space, you become a better listener. Because you're not afraid of silence anymore. You don't need to fill every gap in conversation with noise. You can give people space to think, to feel, to express themselves fully. And when people feel truly heard, truly seen, truly understood, that's when real connection happens. I notice this in my relationships now. Conversations are different, deeper, more meaningful. Because I'm actually present. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say next or how I'm being perceived. I'm just there, fully engaged, genuinely curious about the other person's experience. And people respond to that. They open up in ways they never did before. They trust me with their truth because they can feel that I'm trustworthy with it. Silence also changes your relationship with time. We're obsessed with time in this culture. We're always rushing, always busy, always feeling behind. There aren't enough hours in the day. We don't have time. Time is money. Time is running out. This constant time pressure creates enormous stress and anxiety. But here's what I discovered. Time isn't the problem. Our relationship with time is the problem. We've forgotten how to be present. We're always thinking about what's next, what we need to do, where we need to be. We're never fully here. We're always half somewhere else. Planning, worrying, reminiscing, anticipating. Silence brings you back to now. The only moment that actually exists. The only moment where life is actually happening. When you're fully present, time expands. An hour of presence feels longer and richer than a week of distraction. You're actually living your life instead of just moving through it on autopilot. I started practicing this everywhere. While eating, I just eat. While walking, I just walk. While talking to someone, I'm just there with them. No multitasking. No divided attention. Just full presence. And my life went from feeling rushed and chaotic to feeling spacious and calm. Not because I have more time. I have the same 24 hours everyone has. But because I'm actually present for the time I have. Let me address something important. Silence isn't about becoming passive or disconnected from the world. Some people think spirituality or inner work means checking out, becoming so focused on your inner world that you stop caring about external reality. That's not what I'm talking about. If anything, silence makes you more engaged with the world, not less. Because when you're clear about who you are and what matters to you, you can show up more powerfully. The activism we need, the change we need, the leadership we need, it all comes from people who are grounded in themselves. People who've done the inner work. People who aren't just reacting from trauma or ego, but responding from wisdom. Some of the most powerful change makers in history, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, they all had deep contemplative practices. They all understood that changing the world starts with changing yourself. Silence gives you the clarity to see what needs to change and the courage to do something about it. It gives you the emotional regulation to stay calm under pressure. It gives you the wisdom to choose your battles. It gives you the compassion to fight for justice without becoming the thing you're fighting against. So this challenge isn't about escaping the world. It's about engaging with the world from a place of consciousness instead of unconsciousness. It's about breaking the autopilot patterns that keep us stuck. It's about waking up to your own life. Let me give you some practical guidance for the 21-day challenge, because I want you to actually do this, not just feel inspired for a moment and then forget about it tomorrow. First, pick your silence hour carefully. Choose a time when you're least likely to be interrupted. For most people, early morning works best before the demands of the day start piling up. Before your mind gets cluttered with tasks and responsibilities, wake up an hour earlier. I know, you're tired, you value sleep, you're not a morning person. I get it. But nothing will change if nothing changes, and an hour less sleep will not kill you. The benefits you'll receive from this practice will give you more energy than an extra hour of sleep ever could. If morning really doesn't work, find another time. Maybe lunch break, maybe before bed. The time doesn't matter as much as the consistency. Do it at the same time every day. Your brain loves patterns. When you make something a non-negotiable daily practice, it becomes automatic. Second, create a sacred space. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just a space that you designate for this practice. A corner of your bedroom, a spot in your backyard, a park bench, somewhere you can be relatively undisturbed. And here's the critical part: no phone, not on silent, not face down, not even in the room. Your phone is a portal to everyone else's urgency, everyone else's priorities, everyone else's noise. For this hour, you're off the grid. Third, what do you do during this hour? There's no right answer. Some days you might sit in meditation. Some days you might journal. Some days you might just stare at nothing. The goal isn't to do it right. The goal is to be with yourself without distraction. Notice what comes up. Notice your thoughts without judging them. Notice your emotions without pushing them away. Notice the resistance. Notice the restlessness. Notice the moments of peace. Just notice. You might want to keep a journal specifically for this challenge. After each silence session, write down what you noticed. What thoughts kept recurring? What emotions came up? What insights emerged? You'll be amazed at what you discover when you look back at these entries after 21 days. Fourth, be gentle with yourself. Some days will be easier than others. Some days you'll feel peaceful and centered. Other days you'll feel agitated and uncomfortable. Both are valuable. The uncomfortable days are often where the most growth happens. Don't judge yourself for having a bad session. There are no bad sessions. There's just the practice. Fifth, notice what happens in the other 23 hours of your day. That's where you'll see the real changes. You'll notice you're more patient. You'll notice you're less reactive. You'll notice you make better decisions. You'll notice you're more present with people. You'll notice you feel more aligned with yourself. These aren't dramatic, lightning bolt changes. They're subtle shifts that compound over time into massive transformation. Now, let me talk about the challenges you're going to face. Because you will face challenges. Your mind will tell you, this is stupid. It will tell you that you don't have time. It will tell you that you're not doing it right. It will tell you that nothing is happening. It will give you 1,000 reasons to quit. That voice is your ego. Your ego is terrified of silence because silence threatens its control. Your ego survives on noise, on drama, on constant activity. When you get quiet, the ego loses its power, so it's going to fight back. It's going to try to convince you this is pointless. Don't believe it. You're also going to face external resistance. People in your life might not understand what you're doing. They might make fun of you. They might feel threatened by your changes. When you start waking up, it can make people who are still asleep uncomfortable. They might try to pull you back to who you were because your growth mirrors to them their own stagnation. Don't let other people's discomfort derail your journey. You might also face what I call the improvement paradox. You start this challenge wanting to improve yourself, to become better, to fix what's wrong. But silence teaches you something different. You don't need to be fixed because you're not broken. The goal isn't to become someone else. The goal is to return to yourself, to strip away all the conditioning and programming and false beliefs, and remember who you actually are underneath all that. This is important. Silence isn't about self-improvement in the traditional sense. It's about self-acceptance. It's about making peace with who you are. It's about letting go of the idea that you need to be different to be worthy. Paradoxically, when you stop trying to change yourself and start accepting yourself, that's when real transformation happens. I know some of you are thinking, this all sounds great, but I'm dealing with real problems. I have financial stress. I have relationship issues. I have health problems. How is sitting in silence going to solve any of that? And you're right. Silence won't magically make your problems disappear, but it will change your relationship to your problems. It will give you clarity about what you can control and what you can't. It will give you access to your own wisdom about what needs to change. It will give you the emotional strength to deal with what needs to be dealt with. I've seen people use this practice to get through divorces, career changes, health crises, grief, trauma, all the big, hard stuff of being human. The silence didn't make those situations easier, but it gave them a foundation to stand on. It gave them access to a part of themselves that wasn't shattered by the circumstances. It reminded them that no matter what was happening externally, there was something inside them that was unshakable. This is what all the spiritual teachers have been trying to tell us. You are not your circumstances. You are the awareness that experiences circumstances. You are not the storm. You are the sky that holds the storm. Silence helps you remember this. It helps you touch that part of yourself that is always okay, no matter what's happening in your life. As we come toward the end of our time together today, I want to leave you with this. The world is loud right now. It's chaotic. It's overwhelming. There's so much noise, so much information, so much stimulation. And the loudness is strategic because when you're overwhelmed, when you're overstimulated, when you're constantly reacting, you can't think clearly. You can't access your power. You can't make conscious choices. You're easier to manipulate, easier to control, easier to keep distracted from what really matters. Silence is rebellion. In a world that profits from your distraction, your attention is the most valuable resource you have. Taking it back, refusing to give it away cheaply, that's a revolutionary act. When you commit to silence, when you commit to knowing yourself, when you commit to living consciously, you become dangerous. Not dangerous to other people, but dangerous to the systems that depend on your unconsciousness. You start asking questions like, why am I buying things I don't need? Why am I working a job that makes me miserable? Why am I in relationships that drain me? Why am I living according to someone else's blueprint? Why am I betraying myself to fit in? These questions are powerful. They lead to change, real change. So this 21-day challenge, it's not just about feeling more peaceful, though you will. It's not just about reducing stress, though you will. It's about reclaiming your life. It's about remembering that you have a choice in how you live. It's about stepping off the hamster wheel and asking yourself, what do I actually want? Who do I actually want to be? How I actually want to spend my one precious life? The world needs people who have done this work. The world needs people who